All right, so now we're having fun. We're in Illustrator. We've outlined our text. And now I'm just moving them individually. So kerning doesn't matter so much here because I'm creating it as I go. And I'm rotating. And the other thing I like to point out because it's outlined now, it's no longer easy for me to make this italicized, which might be better for these. But if I wanted to, I could go back to my top solution here, which is still as a text tool, and I can try that. So I can go to my type tool, and I can italicize, Command I, both those, if italics is an option that's given. And it might not be with this typeface. So my best option is to work with it as an outlined vector. So how do you italicize an outlined vector? Well, you take your points, and I'm going to lasso these bottom points here, and you drag them off to the side. So you can select multiple anchor points at once, which is a helpful trick, by using the lasso. And I can tuck these ones in using the small selection tool, and then pull the others out, even though there's 3 anchor points making that curved bottom. Right? And then just modify the transition between. And I'm particularly interested in modifying this T anyway because I have 2 of them right next to each other for my text. I don't want them to look exactly the same. That's like kind of a lazy getaway. Showing that you just didn't do that much if you have that copy-paste being a distraction visually. Now you can see why being able to select multiple anchors and move them can be helpful, especially when they're grouped closely together, and they'll give you trouble. These are some of the annoyances of Illustrator. Those little lines are there, whether you can see them easily or not. And I can play with the curves until they're as straight as I want or as wonky as I want. Kind of don't mind the wonkiness for right now. And then I can either choose this and put this in, or I can work from the design I just did and duplicate that. Because I'm working to customize, I think I'll work with this one. Select these slightly rounded corners, then use the small selection tool to move them where I need them to be. And I'll get into fine-tuning it a little later. But for now, those feel distinct and readable. Same thing with the E. I didn't modify it before, but now I have another E. So I am more encouraged to modify it beyond just size and rotation. So it doesn't look too copy-pasty from the other one. And you can use your arrow keys to help with placement as well. So the way I might modify this, grab those curved corners and just kind of point them a little bit. I'm no longer working with horizontal anyway, so I can have fun with the angles. And then you can play with the curves. Even them out, straighten them out. Remember that lasso will help you when you have groups of pixels or groups of anchors together. Excuse me. And I'm sure there are shortcuts for lots of these, so I'm not always having to go back to the toolbar, but I don't use them frequently enough to know them as well as I know the Photoshop shortcuts. And of course, if modifying, I'm doing a lot more of just modifying anchor points using pen tool stuff than I have before. But if none of that is working for you, remember you can always just use the pencil tool and redraw. I just encourage you to use it on ultimate smooth instead of accuracy. So we're going for cleanliness with our fonts here. Font hygiene is very important. All right, so lastly, I'm just going to point this corner in a little bit, just slightly. Curve this one. By the way, if it gives you this little dot option when you're at near a corner, if you click it, that allows you to split the anchor into two anchors to get a rounded corner, which especially for fonts can be very useful, turning a sharp edge into a rounded edge. You see I already like that E better than this E, just because I modified it slightly. Now here's the trick. I want that R to still fit in. Before I can scale it, I have to switch to the large selection tool. I'm going to stretch it wider. A lot of capitals will read better if they're widened. And you can widen them quite a bit and still have them very readable. Like Toys R Us. It's a very big R in the middle. And then because I have everything slightly askew, I don't want to have one letter that uses pure horizontals and verticals. So I'm always going to mess with that a little bit. And I always make a mistake. I always hit return after I've rotated, but you don't do that in Illustrator. You just click off of it. So you transform with this tool. Then I'll show you how to round these, right, using those curve options. That helps. Then I'm going to select this group here, which is already rounded, move it in a little bit, combine some of these anchors. By dragging them on top of each other, you can modify them. It's easier than deleting them sometimes. And this will be a little tricky. Aha, that worked. Let's have a little lone anchor point I don't want here. There we go. Oh, Illustrator, you're so picky. There we go. And then this straight edge, what if I want to smooth it? I can just use the smooth tool, kind of round it out. With the pencil tool. And if I want to straighten this, I can just delete these anchor points. Make it nice and straight between those curves. The shortcut for deleting anchor points is just minus. Now I might want to widen this middle, but if I want to redraw the middle, I can use the eraser tool, separate it, and then just delete, right? That's probably going to be too much. So better yet, let's just redraw it with the pencil tool. Just widen it up just a little bit. And then smooth it. So just modifying type until you're happy with it. Then if you want to straighten it up, you can add anchor points. Like I'll add one here. And then move them without curves. So just start getting rid of curves, or even getting rid of the anchor points in the middle. There we go. Oops. So now that's nice and big. Let me transform it a little bit more, fit it in. And you see how just that slight tilt helps make us realize it's part of this letter still, as it matches the tilt of the E. I'll shrink it just a little bit back towards that. Okay, so I've got a better, it's a good time to save. I'm going to go backwards with world because I want it to bracket, right? It's all about the space it takes up. So I have the A here, I want the D to be here. So I need this to be pretty big. To select it, I could use the lasso, I could use it here, but I can also use the small selection tool, click inside it, then move to the large selection tool to be able to move it and rotate it independently. Lots of different options. And of course, I can do all this, but then I'm going to need to modify it. Now this one's pretty funky, and I want it pretty big, just like I did for the A. But this time let me use just more of the pencil tool. Now that I have more of a feel for what I want from these fonts, from these distortions of the given typeface, feel a little bit more emboldened to just draw them with smooth on. Work on the inside, stretch it out, slightly italicized. What happened there? So when that happens, it kind of undercut. I have to separate it so that I can just delete that center out. Go to the small selection tool, just